The Fantasy Ruckers are back from our Canadian Thanksgiving break, and there's a whole lot of Major League Rugby news to catch up on, from new roster moves to the latest on the situation on the Austin Gilgronis and LA Giltinis. We break down the latest headlines and, of course, their impact on fantasy rugby in the MLR. The Fantasy Ruckers show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 40 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much to our Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on this journey of trying to make fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. With you, as always, Matt Yee, Devin Vanderpool, Ryan Yee here with you after a little Canadian Thanksgiving break. But we are back, boys, and there's a whole lot to talk about before we get to it. Vandy, how was your Canadian Thanksgiving, man, in the Great White North?
It was good. It was good, buddy. Had some family down, went over, seen some family, went up to Hamilton, seen some family. So, yeah, it was good.
Traveling all over. That's good
to
hear.
Did you guys do any Canadian Thanksgiving?
Well, for all of you listeners who may have been tagging along and been watching us for some time, you know that Vandy is situated up in the Great White North. Matt That's and right, I baby. Have since we grew up in Canada and have since moved to the United States. And Matt, I don't know for you if you had any kind of Canadian Thanksgiving like thoughts or inklings heading into it, but I completely forgot that it was Canadian Thanksgiving.
No, I can't forget. So I was let me write down 3 things that I wrote down that I was thankful for. Okay. You want me to write? Do you want me to say it out? I'll share it with everybody. Okay. One. First and foremost, I was thankful that we could have an MLR Fantasy Rucker League this year. 1.
There we go. Nice.
2. I was thankful that I got to speak to Stacey Pates this year. Nice. That's number 2. 3. I was thankful that the MLR has been so kind to offer up the stats for the past season. And wait, no, you're not offering stats or beyond at this point. So why don't you just do it and send us the dang postage? Okay, that's my thankful 3s.
Hey, you know what? I'm thankful for you guys.
Hey,
there's 3 of us. That's 3 thankfuls for you. You're even thankful for yourself, buddy.
I mean, I am thankful for myself.
Yeah, me too.
But hey, good to hear that you had a nice Thanksgiving, Vandy, there with the family, hanging out with everyone, and hopefully having some things that you're thankful for as well, just like Matt is there. Matt, what are you gonna do for then American Thanksgiving, man? You already have.
I'm gonna have 4 things I'm thankful for. 4 things.
There we go. So you can expect.
Yeah, one more in America.
You can expect in a month's time for those 4 thankful things to look out.
I'm taking the Monday off.
Well, you know what? This is the perfect opportunity for the MLR to come in here and make me thankful for the 4th thing, and that is stats this upcoming season. So let's go.
There we go. Let's go. Exactly. Do you think we're cheating, Matt? Do you think because we got a break there on Canadian Thanksgiving, and we're probably going to take another break during American Thanksgiving? So
are we cheating or are we multicultural? Yeah. We're a diverse company, no? We're a diverse corporation.
The Fantasy Ruckers are international, baby.
We're a multicultural. That's what we are.
Company.
The difference between Canada and America is like Burger King and McDonald's, all right?
Big differences. For those of you who haven't tried. Big difference.
All right, well, let's move on here. Let's break it all down. All that stuff we heard at the top. There's a whole bunch of news that we missed out on the last week, so we're gonna spend this entire episode breaking it all down. There's also been some pretty big developments when it comes to the whole LA Giltinis, Austin Gilgronis situation. So we're gonna break that down as well. So a little bit of a different episode here for you guys. No interviews in this one. Just really gonna take the time to go through all the news that we have missed over the past 2 weeks or so. And then obviously talk about the fantasy impact that's going to have, because I think there's a whole bunch of stuff here that we're about to talk about that is going to have that fantasy impact. Before we head into it, though, if you aren't already, you know what to do. go follow us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. That's where you can keep up to date with our sole Fantasy Ruckers league right now. But if we have any future announcements with regards to expanding the league, expanding the amount of players that we can incorporate and have in fantasy rugby in the MLR, that is where you're going to hear about it first. In the meantime, you can tune into these episodes that are posted on YouTube and on anywhere you listen to podcasts as well. We also have a Discord channel where we have a nice little fantasy MLR community going. They're discussing all things fantasy rugby and beyond, talking a little bit about the World Cup going on and things like that. So hey, if you want to talk a little bit more rugby, if you're a little bit bored this off season, you can go and head out to our Discord channel. You'll find the link down below to join that. Lots of good stuff there. So now that we got all that housekeeping stuff out of the way, you guys ready for it? You guys ready to break down the news here? There's a whole bunch that we got to get to. I think we should start with the roster moves first. So what do you think is the best way to go about this, guys? I just start listing out roster moves, and then you stop me if there's anything that you want to talk about with regards to impact and fantasy impact.
Yes, spit it out to us.
All right, sounds good. Let's start off here with the roster moves that happened the week prior to this episode, during that week where we were off for the Canadian Thanksgiving. Once again, fantastic resource when it comes to roster moves in the MLR, and really anything.
Don't tell me it's James Delay.
Jam Delay, James Dealey on Twitter and on Instagram, MLR Stats. He's been doing a fantastic job towards during the season, and especially during this off season, of keeping everyone up to date with the latest roster moves, and also nice little tidbits here and there about certain fun stats that happened during the last the last MLR season, and also just historical stats and other interesting information with regards to the MLR. So if you want more MLR content, definitely go out there and follow him on Twitter, Jam Delay on Twitter, and MLR Stats on Instagram. It really helps us keep track of all the roster moves that are going on. So we're going to be using that here today to break it all down. So let's get right into it, guys. So let's start with the roster moves that happened in between those weeks, or in between that week that we were off. We're going to start off, and that is again the from October 3rd to October 9th. A lot of re-signings happening lately with a whole bunch of teams. So I'll go through those. Zach Bastrez returning to the New England Free Jacks, a guy that we just had on the Fantasy Ruckers show, friend of the show, Owen Rutten, also re-signing there with the Toronto Arrows as well. So he's signing his contract, not re-signing. He hasn't even stepped on the field yet.
Say, wait, what?
Signing his official contract with the Toronto Arrows. So he'll be suiting up for them in this upcoming year. Really, really excited for him and the impact that he's going to have on the field and from a fantasy side as well, especially if we can introduce those hits and those breakdown steals. He's going to be an absolute monster if that's going to be the case. So he signs with the Toronto Arrows, with the team that drafted him. Another couple re-signings. Malcolm May returns to the NOLA Gold. Doug Fraser returns to the Old Glory DC. And another big one here, and probably the biggest out of the re-signings from that week, is Junior Sao is returning to Old Glory DC as well. Junior Sao is a player that finished in the top 20 of our fantasy rankings, finishing 15th overall at that center position for DC, 61.3 points, returning to Old Glory DC, hoping to basically do that same thing again. Any thoughts on the Junior Sao signing, or basically just expect the same going forward here?
I mean, that one I think we actually hit on the last episode.
Did we? Okay.
But that's how good he is. We got to hit him up twice.
Yeah, that's right.
And we got to just
talk about him twice.
Oh yeah. That it is.
There you go.
But
all right. Well,
if you want to see what I have to say about Junior Sao, go see our last episode.
Go see our last episode a couple weeks ago. We break it all down. All right, moving on then. Shane O'Leary going from a Pro 2 side, moving over to the Toronto Arrows. So that should be pretty interesting there for Shane O'Leary. Still, again, something that we've been seeing as of late here with all these signings that have been happening this offseason. Again, we feel, at least with how long that we've been kind of involved with the MLR, that this has been an influx of signings, an increase of the number of signings that we've seen during an offseason. I don't remember it being this crazy in previous MLR seasons, so it has been pretty interesting. And then on top of that, seeing the international signings like Shane O'Leary to the MLR is also very encouraging, because obviously now there's
Shane O'Leary's got that Canadian eligibility and Canadian
have-
caps. So
he does have
is
that
he an
Canadian
international
eligibility.
player? I don't know, but he is got the talent to play overseas. So it's great to see him come back home.
Absolutely, and this is a guy that plays at the fly half position. So obviously, Toronto is a team that has a lot of players at that position. You got Sam Malcolm, you had Will Kelly appear there a few times there. Now you add Shane O'Leary to the mix. Not too sure if you're going to see much of a fantasy impact at that point, but nonetheless, he's going to the Toronto Arrows. Henry Bell moving from Otago, going to the Utah Warriors. So Vandy, you're getting a little bit of international talent there into the Utah Warriors side, and then we're starting to move into some interesting movement here surrounding the two teams that we will be getting into more in depth here in just a bit on the show. But the LA Giltinis and the Gilgronis seem to be making move here, largely involving 2023 cap considerations, which is kind of interesting on its own. So to break it down, San Diego Legion involved in both of these moves. Luke Burden will be going to the San Diego Legion in exchange for cap considerations from the Giltinis, and then Marcel Brackey is also going to the San Diego Legion from the Austin Gilgronis in exchange for 2023 cap considerations. So there are two moves there that are kind of interesting. These two moves I do feel are going to have a fantasy impact, guys. And then on the flip side of it, kind of interesting to see with the whole situation going on and the I guess up in the air nature that the Gilgronis and Giltinis are in, that they're still moving, cap considerations and
I was just about to
you know
ask
what
that,
I mean? Like it's
what
kind
would
of
be the
interesting.
purpose of that?
Not too sure.
Because
I mean, we're
they're
gonna break
over
it down.
the cap.
Right.
I
But we're going to break it down. But if these teams fold, and we're going to get into a deeper conversation in just a bit here. But if these teams were to fold, you're essentially getting Luke Burden and Marcel Brackey for cap considerations that aren't going to be used. Not too sure. You know what I mean?
No,
I don't
want to touch on any of that the news yet, but just in theory, could they just start dishing players for nothing just to cause let's say Gilchrist just is ticked off at the league and just goes, I'm going to sell my top tier guys for nothing.
I mean, I guess in this
considerations.
In this essence, it is basically nothing. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, I guess Legion is losing out on cap considerations, but if there's not even a Giltinis team or a Gilgronis team, I'm not too sure what those considerations are going to be. I mean, the San Diego Legion still, I guess, pay for it, but it's not being used. I'm not too sure. But again, we're going to break it all down here in just a moment here when we get into the Giltinis and the Gilgronis. But again, interesting to see that move being made. From a fantasy perspective, Luke Burden, a guy that was kind of on and off, wasn't really an impactful player towards the beginning of our fantasy season, was dealing with injury problems there, but towards the tail end, started to kind of make an impact, finishing 74th on the fantasy rankings in last season. Again, I want to remind all our listeners and our viewers that this is based on the stats that we had involved last year, which is heavily try oriented and scoring oriented. So again, just make sure you're keeping that in mind. But this is a guy that had center eligibility, kicked the ball every once in a while, 34 total fantasy points. We'll see whether or not he is able to make an impact on the San Diego Legion team that seems to be filling up their roster with a whole bunch of guys that we're just not too sure
what
where
these
they're going to
guys going to do in their back.
A lot of age.
I mean, you got age, but you've got a lot of backs there. I mean, backs that were starting on other teams. Like, what are you going to do with all that talent that you've got there? Like, I don't know. I think it'll be, honestly, I think it's getting to a point where having San Diego Legion players with the amount of talent that they have might actually be a downside for fans.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting because I think what you're probably going to have going into San Diego Legion matches, if this is kind of the roster construct that we're going to be going in with, is that you're just not going to be certain, especially with your guys' experience with those starting lineups coming out and having to wait, who am I going to put in my fantasy lineup based on those starting lineups that are being revealed by these teams sometimes so late into the week and into those matchups. You just might not be sure who will be starting at what positions on a regular basis. I mean, we're talking about last last year, when we look at that San Diego Legion starting side, we're talking about guys starting off the year. You're looking at Will Hooley, who was the de facto number 10 there for the Legion. You got Joe Peterson at the 15, and then you got at the center position Ma Nanu at that inside center position, and the outside center position it was Thomas Morani in the start of the year, and then towards the tail end became Tian Lutz. But then you're bringing in now Mike Teo, who's returning to the San Diego Legion, who we've spoke about may be slotting into that center position because of the logjam that they have at those back three positions. And then now you're adding, Luke Burden to the mix. You're adding Marcel Brackey to the mix, which is just going to, I feel like, confuse things. So it might be interesting because now that you have Luke Burden, is it Luke Burden going that outside center position, or is it going to be Mike Teo in that outside center position? In a back three sense, you're looking at guys that suited up for the San Diego Legion. Thomas Aoki, he made a little bit of a fantasy impact towards the tail end of the year. Bjorn Basson, you're not taking him out of your lineup. And you're adding a couple more names to the list. So to your point, Matt,
the guy who plays lots of minutes on that team, like who's going to log a 70-minute game?
Sure. And I think that inconsistency might extend to Matthew's point, even past just, a game, being able to rely on him from within a game basis. But I think from a week in, week out basis, it is completely fair to think that, hey, Will Hooley might start at the 10 position 1 week, or Mike Teo might start at the center position 1 week, and then you got Luke Burden slotting there at the center position the next week and giving Mike Teo a little bit of time off, or Joe Peterson, with the age that he's getting to now, for him to take a game or two off to allow maybe Mike Teo to go in there. They're building depth, and from a team standpoint, that's a great thing, and that's going to be something that goes long for them in real rugby and in the MLR campaign in 2023. But from a fantasy sense, it's a little bit tricky because you're just not sure who's going to be suiting up on a weekly basis and who will be getting you those points.
They've got to be over the cap. Right, they got to be pretty close.
That's exactly what I was thinking. How does this cap work in this?
They've got to be either people are taking pay cuts or they've got to be somewhere up there.
Now, what's salary? How does?
But here's the thing, though. They traded cap considerations away.
Their own cap.
Not only are they filling up their cap room with the salaries of these players that they're acquiring, but they're also giving away cap that would even reduce their space even more. Hey, you know what would solve the whole problem if there was a little bit of transparency and we knew what the cap was and what these players were getting paid? But we don't.
Straight up. They have 3 starting 10s, I think 4 starting centers, 6 starting back threes. All of these guys would start on other teams,
and everybody could play fullback.
Yeah, everybody could play. And you're telling me, and out of those, there are 5 or 6 international guys, and you're telling me that they're not getting close.
I'm owning the Legion this year, I tell you that.
Hey, he's going to be out the door with, the trend of guys getting close to the cap.
Yeah. So interesting stuff there. I just want to touch on Marcel Brackey's fantasy finish. I feel like he had a little bit of an impact, finishing in the top 100, just in the top 100 of our fantasy rankings, 99th on the year, 28.6 fantasy points at that back 3 position for the Gilgronis. And again, it'll be interesting to see how he kind of slots into that San Diego Legion lineup on a team that apparently already has a lot of guys that have made an impact from that position. You're talking about Bjorn Basson, who put up 42.7 total fantasy points from that winger position, and then Thomas Aoki, who wasn't even around for that kind of first third of the season, racked up 32.6 fantasy points toward the tail end there on that back 3 position as well. So going to be interesting to see how the San Diego Legion kind of shape up their starting lineup. Who's going to be those de facto guys? Are they going to, or maybe there isn't that de facto lineup, and they just have they really utilize that depth and put out different players on a weekly basis. We're just not too sure, and it's at the end of the day going to surely have a fantasy impact, either positively or negatively. We'll see whether or not how it shakes up here as we move along towards closer towards the opening kickoff of the 2023 year. Last move from last week, though, that we need to talk about, a little bit of a trade here between 2 teams. The NOLA Gold trading with the Dallas Free Jacks. Cale Hodgson getting traded to the NOLA Gold for Devereaux Ferris, who will then be going to the Dallas Jackals. So, hey, little bit of movement here for a player that is at that scrum half position. Finally, we're seeing the Nola Gold stop collecting all these different nines that they've been collecting over the entirety of the offseason up to this point. And now they are finally moving off of one of them, shipping out Devereaux Ferris to the Nola Gold, and then acquiring obviously Cale Hodgson from the Dallas Jackals, who I believe I'm pulling up right here.
We were just all over the place with team names there, eh, guys? Just all over the place. You know, we're calling them Dallas Free Jacks. We got the Dallas Jackals. We got the guy from. We got the nine from. We got the nine from Nola.
I said one name.
Nola's offloading nines to Nola Gold, and then somebody's going to the Free Jacks. Come on, let's straighten it up.
All right, let's straighten it out here. The Dallas Jackals acquiring Devereaux Ferris for Cale Hodgson, who goes to the Nola Gold. Cale Hodgson is a winger. Devereaux Ferris is a scrum half. Nola Gold has been acquiring a lot of scrum halves. They moved off of one of their scrum halves and now don't have as many
and now they
scrum
still
halves.
have 5.
Exactly.
Lots
So was that good?
man.
Was that clear enough? Sorry.
That was good. Now I figured out who the Jack was that you were talking about.
Okay, yeah, Jackals, Free Jacks, lots of Jacks.
It wasn't the Free Jacks.
Jack
It wasn't the
McRogers.
Jack McRogers. It wasn't the Jack Isseros. It was the Dallas Free Jacks Jackals.
The Dallas Free Jackals. The Dallas, Jackal High, Jackal. Okay. All right. So that's the last of the moves there. Again, it'll be interesting to see whether or not Devereaux Ferris has an impact there in that Dallas Jackals lineup. Looking at the nines that played for the Jackals last season, we're talking about guys like Carlo Denison, who had kind of an up and down year, not really from a fantasy standpoint. 13.2 fantasy points on the year, making 9 total appearances, 9 starts. So obviously was kind of the guy that was the big aspect for them. For the most part, we saw appearances from Danny Carlton and appearances from Tom Brusati, who also had fly half position. So definitely a team that had the need for scrum half depth. Whether or not Devereaux Ferris is going to actually make an impact from a fantasy standpoint is yet to be seen. I wouldn't bank too much on it, but hey, and then Cale Hodgson going the other way. Again, Cale Hodgson was a guy I don't think either had a big fantasy impact. Not scoring any fantasy points on the year. So new place, new team. We'll see whether or not he can get on the boards here and make a crack in our rankings. So kind of a lower tier trade there. So that is the first week, guys. We're 20 minutes into this episode. We finally got through the first week of roster moves. Again, just insane how many roster moves are happening through this offseason.
Still gotta get to the Gillies. All right, let's keep on moving.
All right, let's keep it moving. All right, moving on now to the roster moves that happened over the last 7 days here up until this episode of the time of this recording. I'm gonna roll through it here, guys. Stop me if you guys see anything from a fantasy perspective or even any big MLR impacts that you're seeing here. So we're going to go through it all here. Gene Symington going from the NPC over to the Toronto Arrows, moving from Hawke's Bay, coming here to over to Canada to suit up for the blue and white there. Appy Nikotini staying with Old Glory DC. John Poland staying with the Free Jacks. Mika Kruse staying with the Utah Warriors. Pretty big signing there. Mika Kruse was
another back. Oh wait, no, that's the Utah Warriors.
Yeah,
the red and black team, and Vandy's teams. He can't choose between the Legion and the Utah Warriors. It gets me all confused sometimes.
You gotta have a 1A and a 1B.
Yeah, whatever.
John Poland, a scrum half that had a pretty big impact there.
That's tough for you, Vandy.
44.5 fantasy points, staying with the New England Free Jacks. Also kicked a little bit, finishing 48th overall in our fantasy
Younger
rankings.
For you.
No younger.
It's not going to start.
And then Mika.
Did he even?
Yeah, he started in the dressing room and never came out.
Wait, why are you talking about younger? Younger, it's on Utah. No, wait, no, he's on Free Jacks. Oh, never mind. Yeah, you're right. John Poland.
We wouldn't take him.
Yeah, exactly.
Not even for salary.
I know my Jacks. Jacks. And when I know that Olden Younger sits on the bench for the New England Free Jacks, I know. And John Poland is now re-signing to make sure that stays consistent.
Yeah. Sorry. I guess Holden Youngert's Holden Younger's chops just didn't give him enough of a boost to overtake that starting lineup. Mike Kruse
on the chopping board.
Mika Kruse, 33.8 total fantasy points last season, 75th overall in our fantasy rankings. So those are some of the big re-signings there. Mitch Jacobson, also moving from NPC from New Zealand, moving from Waikato, going to the New England Free Jacks.
What a signing.
Why don't you talk about that, Matt?
I mean, Mitch Jacobson has, Super Rugby experience.
Yep.
He's no slouch. I mean, like when you have Super Rugby experience, when you have the ability and the opportunity to play in that league, when you are coming to the MLR, you are coming with an incredible wealth of knowledge and advantage. And the fact that he is going to the Free Jacks, an already established team, I mean, he's just going
who likes to use their big boys.
Yeah, and he will just, I think he will just complement them so well. And this is a guy that we should be looking for in the draft. Like this is one of the signings that I think we need to look for as guys that, can flourish into one of those great back rows and one of those great forwards.
So it should be interesting again, coming over from Waikato and going to the New England Free Jacks should be interesting. Jordan Jackson Hope moving from the eastern suburbs to the NOLA Gold, another pretty decent signing for them. Anything on top of Mitch Jacobson, Matt, that you want to talk about in terms of Jordan Jackson Hope or Gene Symington there?
No, I don't got too much. I think Gene Symington was just strictly an NPC guy, so I don't have too much on him. But then Jordan Jackson Hope for the best. I mean, like I think he came from the Australian side. That's an Australian regional side. Not too sure, but I guess we'll find out. Lots of international signings. That's all that I want to say.
Sure. All right. And then Kobe Foss returning with the Toronto Arrows guy again, not really having much fantasy impact. And then Nate Sylvia, again, not a guy that having much fantasy impact either. Again, this all changes if we introduce kind of hits and other stats into this, but at least from last season, he returns to the San Diego Legion. And a pretty big one here that happened last week, and kind of unexpectedly, Ross Neal retiring from the Seattle Seawolves at the age of I believe, how old is he? I think he's only like 26, I think.
26 or 27.
Yeah, something like that. A guy that's made 29 appearances for the Seawolves since 2020. A big-bodied guy that went out there, was physical out there on the wing, scoring 14 tries, 147 carries, over 1,600 meters gained, and 138 tackles in his 3 USMLR seasons. Yeah, pretty crazy to see Ross Neal moving on, but obviously best of luck to him. But that was a guy that definitely had fantasy impact and could have had fantasy impact going this year, especially with a team like the Seattle Seawolves.
Yeah, I adored him on my team, but he's retiring and he's going up to the rafters for the boys, for the Ruck and Roll team. That's what's happening.
51.6 total fantasy points on the year, 29th in our fantasy rankings. When we're talking about guys that, maybe will step up and maybe replace his output there. When we talk about Ross Neal, this is a guy that basically started at the wing position for, I would say, at least half the year almost, and then kind of got reduced. And I don't know if this was due to injury, but reduced to that kind of backup role. But when you start looking at guys that are going to maybe benefit from this from a fantasy perspective, in that wing position, obviously you got you mentioned him, Matt Luani. Am I saying it right? Luaina Futi was a guy that started at that wing position, and then in the back three, I'm just going through here, looking at some guys at that back three position. We'll see where they have that at, but yeah, Ross Neal, definitely an output that's going to be missed. He scored 5 tries last season, so.
Who was the 15 for them that went absolutely bonkers in that one game? But then he also
trying to think
died
here,
in the same game.
It up. How did I miss this?
Martin.
How did I miss this? Martin Iasefo, 55.7 total fantasy points. Duncan Matthews as well at the fullback position. So yeah, those are the guys. Sorry, I was trying to look it on my list. Martin Iasefo, Duncan Matthews, and Luaina Futi will be the 3 guys that I guess you'll be looking at in terms of maybe some of his fantasy production shifting over to some of those guys because they'll have maybe a little bit more playing time and take over those minutes that Ross Neal will be giving up due to his retirement. So Ross Neal moves on. And then now, I know you guys are waiting here for the Giltinis and Gilgronis update here, but there's just a couple more signings that we do need to get through. Foster Dewitt, he re-signs with the New England Free Jacks. Just going through the list here to make sure that I'm not missing anything else. Johan Mumsen returns with Rugby Atlanta. That's a pretty big one. He was a second row guy he was one of the few second row guys that actually made a pretty decent fantasy impact. 79th in our fantasy rankings, 32.2 total fantasy points. Matt Heaton is returning to Rugby Atlanta as well. He's a guy that did also pretty well for Rugby Atlanta, 107th in our fantasy rankings, 27.3 total fantasy points at that back row position. And then Tyler Rowland, he's also returning to the Toronto Arrows as well. And then I think I mentioned, did I mention Penny Lasaka?
No, you did not.
I didn't. Okay, that's a big one then. Penny Lasaka is returning to Old Glory DC. He was a guy that had a huge impact. 13 matches in 2022, 8 tries, over 1,000 meters carried. A big returning player for Old Glory DC, who will obviously look for him to put a bunch of output. He was a top 10 guy in our fantasy league, 65.6 total fantasy points.
Woo! Wow. That was a bunch of signings.
Yeah, a whole bunch of signings. I believe that is it. Two more. Alex Lopetti to Nola Gold, Jonas Petrakopoulos to Rugby Atlanta as well. Okay, I think that's all of them. I think we got them all. Those are all the signings happening to this year.
Cool. My favorite one, Mitch Jacobson.
Jacobson, that's the biggest one.
Yeah.
You think he has a fantasy impact?
Do I think he has? I think this. I don't need. You can have hits. You can have tries. Yeah, he has a fantasy.
So if he has does he have an impact? If we stick with the same rules that we had last season, does Mitch Jacobson have this a fantasy impact? Is he one of the top front rowers that are in the league?
Yeah, I mean he'll have a fantasy impact.
Okay, all right, good to know. So I think from what I get from it, if I'm just looking at all the signings and the impacts that they're having, probably the biggest ones there are the return of Penny Lasaka is a big one. Retirement of Ross Neal. Matt, you mentioned that Mitch Jacobson is a big one. John Poland returning to the Free Jacks is a big one. And then I think the whole San Diego debacle with Luke Burden and Brackey going over to San Diego Legion in that situation. That's probably all the biggest signings of those 2 weeks that we're probably keeping an eye on. Is that correct?
Yeah. And I mean, Mitch Jacobson playing in that back row position is just going to have a feast. So.
Sure. All right. Well, hey, that's all of our signings, I believe, that we have needed to get through. Again, those are all those signings are things that we're going to have to keep a watch for, because, again, they are going to have an impact in the fantasy landscape. And yeah, like Matthew was chanting right here, it is time to move on to the news that everyone wants to talk about. And at the time, and obviously this is a this is a
what motion? What?
This is a situation that is constantly changing. At the time, this is all the latest updates that we're getting at the time of the recording of this episode. So if there's anything that comes out after this, just keep that in mind. But this is what we have at this point in time. So I'm trying to figure out kind of the best way to break this down for you, Matt. I don't think you've seen this announcement yet, but I think the best way to go through this is kind of a timeline of events over the past kind of week that we've kind of seen, and kind of go from there. I think that might be the best way to explain it to the people and update the people where we stand with this whole situation.
Okay. You explain it, but I gotta throw in some certain things that you might miss that I know that you don't have.
Ooh,
all right.
Oh wow, you're the insider now.
Well, I speak to. I told you what 4 episodes ago that I found him. Right, I found him. I've been talking to him, so you
found Gilchrist. Okay,
Adam?
Yeah, I got
Adam
it.
himself.
It's Mr. Gilchrist too. Adam, I actually call him Adam. Yeah.
Yo, what up, D man?
I call him the Dam.
All right. Well, okay. Let's go through it. I think everyone knows kind of the situation that we sit at right now. Basically, the same point that we've sat at for the past, I guess, a few months or so. Still, not really any communication coming from the MLR, coming from the whole situation. Really, the only statement that we still have from the league is that statement that we read way back when they released that out on Twitter. So we still haven't heard anything from that point. No really updates on the sales of these teams. No really updates on anything from that standpoint as of yet. And then also all we know is that it sounds like Gilchrist is going through, and Matt, you could clarify this to me based on what you said to him and the conversations that you've had with the G-Man. But it looks like that he is having some financial struggles in terms of the things that he's had to sell off recently. And there were articles coming out that he is kind of MIA right now, and even his closest associates and friends can't even really get a hold of him.
I can.
Interesting on that front, except for, I guess,
TV. So I told this to his face. I asked him, I said, hey, have you ever watched the show Black Adam, the one with The Rock? You ever watched So Black? He goes, oh yeah, I did. I said, yeah, well, you're the same thing, except you're broke, Adam.
Oh my God. Did you write that one down this morning?
How long you been waiting for that?
All right, Gilly news, let's go. Gilly.
Oh my God! All right, I feel like it's every time we talk about this news, man, it goes off the rails. But all right, we'll keep it moving. We'll keep it moving here.
Daddy is
So nonetheless, in all seriousness, haven't really had any crazy updates with regards to this whole situation until the past week or so. And this is where things have kind of been stirring up, and this is why we wanted to take this episode to kind of make sure that we're covering all the bases here and breaking this down, because obviously this is a very precarious situation, something that is still trying to get resolved, and still a lot of parties involved that are still trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and obviously a lot of serious stuff going on, but nonetheless, this is going to have a fantasy impact as well, so we're going to make sure we touch on that too. So with that all being said, let's bring you to what the latest happened in this past week, and that started basically with a tweet that came out a day or two ago by a guy named John Woolley, and I'm not sure.
And he's verified, isn't he?
No, he's not verified. Unfortunately, he's not verified, which it would have added to the little mix. But according to his social media bio, he is social media support for IG Rugby. It's an organization, a rugby organization. So he is involved in the rugby landscape. And according to his tweet, this is what he says: according to a source I heard, at USMLR will replace at Gilgronis and the Giltinis with a team from Chicago soon, likely for the next season. The expansion and dispersal draft will be announced soon to allocate the Gil players for the MLR 2023 season and to stock up Chicago. So that was a tweet that was sent out at October 16th, 6:37 p.m. Guys, initial thoughts on kind of that tweet as we carry along on this Adam Gilchrist story.
Chicago's cool place. I think it'd be a great spot for a team.
It would be a cool place.
It would be a cool spot.
Hopefully they're better than the Bears.
Well, it doesn't take much, but
Blackhawks. Ooh, they got some bad teams.
They do. It's a bad time for Chicago sports right now.
What was I gonna say? Well, now we bring back the teams to even, if that's true, which is great. I mean, that's good to see. But I mean, the big thing for me here is that I think we're gonna expect. The big thing that I took away from that was that whole, what is it called, disposal and predisposition draft?
Yeah.
Dispersal draft? Yeah, dispersal draft.
Disposal draft.
It's like throwing out big words.
Dispersal draft. Hey, so do you think that these guys, Luke Burden, Marcel Brage, they're all leaving so that they can choose where they want to go, right? Luke Burden wants to stay in California. He's saying, hey, trade me over to San Diego Legion, right? I want to be over there because I was staying in California.
Manager in place, no? Like there's still...
Hey, look, the other thing that I've seen going around is that LA Giltinis have not even been in contact with any, like, have not been contacted by anyone of the organization.
Yeah,
they are in the dark on this, Vandy. They are moving themselves. You know who facilitated that trade? Luke Burden facilitated that trade.
I'm just thinking of like the Giltinis facility, they just got like a checkout book, and you just like write your name in there. Luke Burden. What do I want to leave for? Salary cap considerations. You leave your keys on the front desk and you get out of there. Like,
no, and then he walks into the San Diego
group. You're just like, okay, yeah.
You guys got it wrong.
He walks into the San Diego Legions place and goes, "Hey, I'm here. I got traded here." That's what the coach said.
There's a shoebox, okay? And then basically every day they're gonna pull a guy's name out, and they already have a team. So they're like, "Hey, who's going to San Diego? Luke Burton."
It's
now
Secret
just
Santa.
Wait, just wait.
Santa MLR teams.
This weekend is Utah Warriors. I'm not making this up. This weekend,
making this up, dude.
A Giltini
You're
will be
making
traded
this
to
up.
Utah.
I should be
making this
all
up.
out. This is all.
You're making this up. This has no bearings.
Your source is not as good
the
as
Utah
John
Warriors
source.
Reddit group has like 5 people in it, and you are 4 of them.
Mark my words.
All right. Well,
Utah.
I guess to go back on the conversation though, Vandy, that you kind of started about earlier, this is where I want to bring up where it's interesting with the Luke Burden move and with the Marcel Brackey move is if the Gilgronis and Giltinis don't have a team anymore, where are those cap considerations going from San Diego?
Chicago.
But do they get both of them? Like now are they reaping the rewards of both trades? Are they I just it's and who, but they're not even, but Brackey isn't even like, do they there's a dispersal draft. So Brackey and Luke Burden are technically not even their players. So
I don't know. Maybe this is just going straight into Gildini's pocket. Like Mr. Gilchrist's pocket.
Yeah, Gilchrist needs cap considerations.
Technically, these contracts are like owned by the league now, right?
Well, so that's what some of the verbiage was going through, was that it sounds like the contracts are owned by the league, and it is the league who is paying these players. However, what is unclear is the amenities and other things that are involved with these players, like talking about, living situations, food, other things like that. I'm not too sure if the MLR is taking care of that. Is that something that the teams are taking care of? And if that being said, with all the miscommunication and lack thereof, is that the thing that is really impacting these players, which is interesting. So nonetheless, let's move on here with this Adam Gilchrist story, because there is more. This is not where the story ends with this tweet. This is actually just the beginning. So as of the hearing of this tweet on October 16th, we thought, hey, maybe there's going to be a team in Chicago. Maybe this is a good sign for us to finally move on from this situation. But no. Not only are we hearing from a guy who may have a source who is somewhat involved in the rugby landscape, we're now hearing tweets from former players in the MLR. And Adam Ashe, former LA Giltinis player, has come out with a thread of tweets at the time of this recording, really within the last 24 hours. And let me read it out for you guys. Let me see, make sure I got the top one here. Really feeling for the players and staff at Giltinis. Over 4 months has passed since the team was eliminated from the USMLR. All people within the organization have been heavily discouraged about speaking out regarding this subject. First tweet. Second tweet. The players and staff are the ones suffering here. From what I understand, there's been no contact, support, comms from the league or the owner to the players. Apparently, they have until Thursday. That would be October 20th, Thursday, to find a buyer, or it's over. One last chance at advertising the buying opportunity. That team and group were an unbelievable bunch. What a shame it would be for it to finish like this. So that's Adam Ashe. That's a guy who is connected within the MLR space, definitely more connected than we are, having played on the LA Giltinis, knowing a bunch of players within the league. When I read those tweets, it sounds like they are nowhere close to closing a deal of them potentially, moving to Chicago. And it sounds like it's even further from the fact from this thing ever getting sorted out, because it sounds like there's no communication being had, even to this day, between players, staff, and the league and ownership groups.
Hey, what's the US RPA?
Well, we're gonna get to that, Vandy. We're gonna get to that. Just wait 1 second here. This is the
I
Adam
just
Ash
found
tweets.
some dirt.
No, I just sent you those tweets, man. Those are the tweets I sent you, dude. Yeah.
Dude, my guy
But
just
what do you
hooked
think
me
of
up.
that? Adam Ash coming out with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit surprised that nothing has made it to the players. You know, I always figure that the players and staff kind of knew what's been going on, and you know that's why we're seeing Luke Burden move. That's why we're seeing Marcel Bosch move. You know, that's why we're seeing Giltinis and Gilgronis still being like fairly active in the off season. You know, not signing anybody, but actually strictly just making trades for cap considerations. You know, trying to make up for what they probably went over the past few years. But yeah, I don't know. That's just, it seems astonishing, but maybe the fact that they can't talk about anything means that there are business negotiations going on, because you don't want anybody talking about negotiations before they actually.
I mean, sure, but I would have, again, like Adam Ash says, we're over 4 months from this thing happening, right? I would have maybe had sided with that, kind of, give them the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah. But Gilchrist is drunk for 3 of them.
Right, trying to clear out his stock, clear out his Gilly stock.
He couldn't sell them. Where else are they gonna go?
Exactly. No more playoff games to be played. So someone's got to drink those beers, right?
Yeah.
But it's just I maybe would have given them the benefit of the doubt about maybe having to be quiet on this because of business deals, because of the lawsuit, because of all those things. Up to months ago, even a month ago. But the fact that we're still sitting here at the end of October and still talking about this thing and still having really no idea about what's going on with the league, the start of the 2023 year inching closer and closer every single day. I know it still feels like we're still ways away from the start of the 2023 year, but it's going to come by real quick. I mean, we're already approaching towards the end of this year, and
it's October.
Before you know it, we'll be in 2023
next month. November.
So pretty nuts. I knew you were going to say that. Pretty nuts. And then kind of to put then a bow tie on the whole developments that have happened. So Adam Ash sends that out less than a day ago with all that information, kind of insight into the situation, into the Giltinis. Then the USA Rugby Players Association, that is basically essentially the association that represents all of the men and women in the United States of the players on the U.S. national team. They represent those guys, so obviously involved when it comes to players in a North American and American professional league that obviously incorporates a lot of American players. This is what they said, and it's a big statement, so I'm going to read it out here. It took 5 tweets, guys, to get this statement out, so I'll make sure that I cover all of it. I'm going to read this out to you guys. Matt, I don't think you've seen this statement. Vandy, I think, like you were saying, you just saw this.
600
so I want to this is probably the biggest news and the biggest update that we've gotten from an official governing body about this situation during the whole I guess the saga of this development going on. So I'm going to read this out, guys, in its entirety, and then I want to get your guys' reaction, and then ultimately at the end of the day, obviously the fantasy impact of this as well. So here we go. So this is a tweet that was sent out by the U.S. Rugby's Player Association on October 18th at around 2:24 p.m. Here we go. So given the circumstances of the last few months, the USRPA sympathizes with Giltinis and Gilgronis players, staff, and families. In light of the recent events, we have noted the following. LA and Austin players informed this week both teams haven't yet found buyers. So this confirms what Adam Ash was saying, and that whatever was being said about this whole Chicago thing may not be as accurate as that we were being maybe led on to. Players and staff are owed large sums of money. Med bills and rent left unpaid by the team are going to collection under players' names. So this is debt collection that's going under the players' names. This is not money that is being put on the teams or the league. This is under the players' names. Not a very good look. Players and families are asked to vacate team apartments with days' notice. This is the third tweet. The league waited 5 months to act and will now put players in a dispersal draft, which will see players being allocated to teams for far, far less than their market value because many team rosters are close to complete. Many players may not have a say in where they play. Fourth tweet. Players' first official contact from the league from the league situation happened today. That is October 18th. Players in contact with the league have not received actionable responses. We expect the league to show transparency and understanding with players and staff tied to this unfortunate situation. The livelihood and careers of 80 plus players, staff, and their families are in jeopardy. Transparency and action is necessary. Whew. So that's a lot of words kind of put out there by the U.S. Rugby's Players Association. But again, this is probably I shouldn't say probably, this is the first biggest update that we've received from an official rugby governing body in the United States. And it sounds like this is not even close to being resolved anytime soon. I can't be optimistic about this situation after hearing those words. Obviously, this is kind of one side of the argument. This is obviously the players' view of things. We haven't seen, again, any statement from the league or the teams outside of that statement that was given by the MLR when the eliminations and the disqualifications were happening. So yeah, well, guys, initial thoughts on what was said by the Players Association. How do you feel about the situation now? What do you think was going to happen with this whole saga and thing with Gilchrist and his two teams moving forward?
Well, the medical bill one is kind of weird to me because that, like, I know just from like NHL and NFL, it happens at kind of a state level. So whatever state that team is in, they have different medical things. But the MLR owns the contract, so they'd own the medical.
I don't think so. See, I think that's what we were saying before, is that I think, and again, this stems from the lack of transparency, right? They said it clear that there isn't a lot of transparency that's happening right now. So we don't know what's in these contracts, and we don't know who is being paid what and who is paying who and things like that. But from my understanding, or I shouldn't even say understanding, from my assumption, is that the players are being paid their wages by the league. Okay, so their playing wages are being paid by the league, but any amenities that go involved with the trainings, the medical stuff, the food, the rent, the things like that, I think that's being supplemented by the teams. And if there isn't an ownership group that is present there to be paying those things off, and if the league is not willing to pay those things off, the players and the staff and the team, or not the team, the players, staff, and the families are the ones left with those bills. And now, according to this tweet, they're the ones that are going to be left with the debt that they thought was being covered by whoever it was covering these things.
You know, I mean, look, in all seriousness, Mr. Gilchrist and the rest of the ownership group, you guys suck for hanging these players and family and staff left out to dry. I mean, this is so much deeper than just like two rugby teams and not knowing where these players are going to go. This is now getting to the point where you are forcing people to now get vacated from their homes because they have no idea where they're going to be in the next year, because they don't know whether the team that they're contracted by is going to be able to pay them or not, or is even going to be around. The second thing, though, is the MLR. I mean, look, you have a responsibility towards the players in your league, because frankly, people will see what happens out of this. You know, whether if it's just America or whether if it's, you know, leaks out to some of the international areas, those who are interested in playing for the MLR or are interested in playing for the MLR are going to see this. And maybe this is now going to say, hey, you know, point at international players, and they're going to say, hey, whoa, do I want to leave what I have here just to travel to America and potentially end up in the same situation there and be treated like that? I mean, you never know, because none of these teams are established. They haven't had time to establish. Yeah. And I mean, I would be worried if this, you know, scares off some international signings, potential international signings. The other big thing that I'm worried about is, I mean, like, you know, even though nobody's buying the team, like let's say nobody buys the team in the next 4 days, I don't think that stops the MLR from saying, oh, okay, maybe we can find an expansion area, you know, an expansion city. I'm sure that they've been looking at it this whole time. But if not, I mean, what are we down to 3 teams in one division and 4 teams in the other? Like that doesn't make sense to me, right?
Well, I think there'd be a little bit more, right? There'd be, because there's 13 teams total. You get
okay, so 5 teams in one and 6 in the other.
Yeah. You're reducing the thing. It's a tough situation. And Matt, you make a good point there, because I think the thing that sticks out to me is that not only are you leaving players in a bad situation with not knowing where to go or not being left with a place to live, to your point, there's a lot of national guys or international guys that are there taking advantage of the amenities that were given to them by the teams, especially the Giltini squad. That was pretty international. And now you got guys that are, they don't have, a home in the US to go to. Moving back to wherever they came from is not an easy thing to do. So you're obviously leaving them in a situation, like you mentioned, Matt, that is just, a really, really unfortunate situation for these players. So yeah, it's crazy to me that there's just been this lack of communication up until this point. I mean, this tweet says it. Adam Ash's tweet says it. It's been months. It's been months.
I wonder if technically we still don't have communication.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. This is not coming from the league or the teams, right?
I wonder if they had to wait for Gilchrist representatives to release certain information.
What the heck is his representative?
Because he could turn around and sue for slander if none of it was true. So you would need to get in contact. Legal representatives would have to disclose said information, or else it would just be hearsay.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know if where Gilchrist is right now, whether he even has access to Wi-Fi.
I do think too, though, that I think if this happened to any other owner that maybe didn't have their hand as deep in the cookie jar as Adam Gilchrist had, now give Gilchrist credit, he was a big part of the establishment of the MLR, by having ownership of those two teams, really pumping a lot of financial resources into the MLR and helping it grow and things like that, outside of, questionable team naming things and things like that. But nonetheless, though, this is not the way that anyone in this situation should be treated or the way that it should have been handled.
By both the team and the league, by the way.
By both the team and the league, exactly. Yeah. I don't want to give the league any slack here. I think that there definitely needed to be another statement of some sort at this point in time, especially now that we're 4 months out. But that I guess is the serious end of things, because Matt, you put it perfectly. This is more than just what's happening on the field. Now you're affecting people's livelihood off the pitch as well. These are people's families. These are like I said, livelihoods that you're affecting, and we never want to see that. So we hope that. Hopefully we get this resolved soon. But shifting to a little bit of a lighter note, though, guys, let's talk about the fantasy impact that something like this might have on maybe your upcoming year. So let's assume, because it does sound like a deal for the Giltinis and the Gilgronis to be in a new location doesn't sound like it's happening. Let's just assume that the likelihood that between now and the beginning of the 2023 year, there will not be a brand new franchise, and we will not have the Giltinis and Gilgronis. So let's talk about the situation of, having 11 teams in the league, and then what that dispersal draft especially would do to players that are fantasy relevant and now find themselves in different situations. So I guess just to throw it out to you guys to start off with is that, hey, you're going to have a whole bunch of guys now that are going to be leaving the Giltinis and the Gilgronis. Like mentioned in this tweet, or in this tweet, that you're gonna the value of these players they won't be getting their market value on the free market, on these draft markets, because a lot of the positions have been filled already and teams are starting. We've talked to a bunch of the players that it sounds like towards the tail end of this year and the beginning of 2023, that's really when training camps are going to start to pick up. They've already thought about their game plans. They thought about their team structure. They thought about their rosters, and I'm not too sure if a lot of teams are going to be willing to not only pick up another contract, and obviously depending on how good that player is, but then to interject that certain player into their roster at the expense of all of the stuff that they've already done to prepare for the upcoming year. Is that something that you think will have a big impact? Guys that are big LA Giltinis and Gilgronis players that that are looking for a new home.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that one, the fact that this is happening in terms of fantasy really just decreases the player pool. I mean, you're losing essentially 23 times 2, so that's 46 guys that would potentially be in lineups in our league. we're losing that, and now they're going to be free agents. The ones that get picked up, even if they do get picked up, what that's happening is that pushing somebody else out of the lineup. Like, yes, they're on a roster, but it's still pushing them out of and at the end of the day, we're not going to draft guys that aren't in the 23 every week.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean, that's the big fantasy impact that I see. I don't think it really matters where these players go. I think at the end of the day, it matters how many teams there are, how many players there are to choose from, and that's going to impact fantasy.
Well, I mean, so I guess what I'm saying too is and that's a great point, because again, Vandy, this firsthand. You deal with, especially with positions that are scarce, fly half, scrum half position. There's 8 teams in our fantasy league.
Vandy,
there's only 8. There's 8 scrum halves that are starting in our fantasy league. There were 13 teams last year, and we were struggling with that position. Now there's going to be only, assuming 11 teams to choose from with regards to starting 9. So it should be even crazier. But yeah, Vandy, your point on this.
Well, it's tough to know the ramifications of what's going to happen here without, even knowing what kind of salary room any team has. Sure. Look at San Diego. Are they going to be able to make much moves with whatever remaining cap they have? So is it really going to boost a team like Dallas? Can Dallas just go nuts now? And
right,
well,
that's true. That's a good point. That's a really good point.
Seattle just opened up a bunch of cap space. These teams that are now opened up, are they now going to have a smorgasbord of players? And now it kind of evens up all these teams.
What was that word?
Rugby New York.
Smorgasbord.
Who was bored? Was smorgasbord?
Well, now is Rugby New York gonna have super is Dallas gonna stop getting lit up every game because now they can just throw mad cash and go get Ryberg for whatever?
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I mean,
you can really afford Ryberg.
And guys, there's a lot of guys that are very fantasy relevant, or even just really impactful.
I think as much as it depletes the list, it kind of bulks it up in a weird way too, because it adds diversity to. It diversifies the crappier teams because now they can go out and spend more money and get these guys.
Sure. I mean, you're talking about a bunch of guys that will be impactful. You're talking about guys like Connor Mooneyham, a former first overall pick, is on the Gilgronis. And talk about a start to his career. Got obviously drafted to the Dallas Jackals. The Dallas Jackals pull out of that first inaugural season, delayed their entrance into the league. Connor Mooneyham moves over to the Gilgronis. He obviously enjoys playing for his hometown team there. And then now he's going through this whole situation and will inevitably most likely have to find himself a new home. So I guess my point being, on top of what you're saying, Matt, about now there being less teams, less fantasy relevant players because we're not fielding as many players on a weekly basis. And then Vandy, your point in terms of some of these players going to maybe worse teams and getting an opportunity, and maybe now we're having a little bit more fantasy output because teams are just better, period. What has me worried is that kind of melding both of your guys' ideas together. See, you guys do good teamwork together.
No, we don't.
With the interaction of players and the movement of players, what if a Connor Mooneyham, goes to a Dallas Jackals and is taking away, the playing time of a guy I'm trying to pull up here a back 3 player that was who's the guy that you had, Matt?
Napolsky, Eric Napolsky.
Sure, and that won't happen because obviously Eric Napolsky is one of the staples on Dallas Jackals. But I'm just saying, you're adding guys to these rosters who are going to be taking away from other guys. Okay, maybe not so much from the wing position, but you're looking at a guy like Ryan Lowrens, who was the starting 9 for the Austin Gilgronis.
He's gone now, though, isn't he?
Did he move to a different team?
Did he go overseas?
I thought he went back to Australia.
Did he go back to Australia? Okay, Pat Cowley.
He went back to Australia.
No, I know what you're saying, though.
You know what I'm saying, though? You got these guys that are going to these positions. Obviously, these players are going to be better than players on other teams. Our team's going to take advantage and be like, hey, you know what?
Sure.
We're going to slot, the starting 9 or some of these players. We're going to start, slot in Connor Mooneyham into our lineup and take away a starting position that we thought was going to be fantasy relevant in the next year, but now is no longer relevant because an unexpected player from the Gilgronis or the Giltinis is now going to that team. So it throws another wrench in things, which is kind of nuts. I think from a fantasy perspective, I think those are the 3 biggest things. What you said, Matt, what you said, Vandy, and kind of melding those 2 ideas here is the biggest impact that it's going to have. Obviously, outside of all the serious stuff that's happening.
I think it definitely tips the scale in the worst favor, though. It definitely more teams, more players, more fantasy output. It's
Yeah.
it's
It's not a good thing for fantasy.
No,
It's definitely
it's
not a
not.
good thing for us. It's definitely not a good thing for the league. Like for definitely for an
It's
established
not.
league,
It's
for a
bad
league
all
that's trying to
around.
establish itself, a
Yeah.
league that's obviously trying to get good optics and trying to like
Now-
show the rugby
And
world
trying to
that
expand
they're
to
ready.
new cities
One
too. I
thing that-
mean, they can't
one
even
thing
handle
that can-
13.
Yeah.
One thing that can like take away from this is the MLR has to create roadblocks so this cannot happen again.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
has to create some kind of, I don't know the legal
I
ramifications.
think MLR
don't know
has to do a lot though. I think
but they got
like
to step up in the way they've treated the players that are involved in this, and they got
well,
to
they've
step
got
up.
to yeah. I mean, also learn to like manage this stuff better.
Yeah.
Like this is ridiculous, right?
I think
Like,
I do agree that I think that we're having a completely different conversation, right? Let's say after the whole thing came out, the MLR comes out with their statement, right? That they came out back at whenever the playoffs were happening. If they come out with a statement, let's say they wait a couple, even a month after the MLR championship, you come out with a statement and say, hey, this is where we stand with this situation.
Put it all on Gilchrist.
Right. And this is where we stand. This is what we can talk about. There are still certain things that we are not legally allowed to reveal or things like that. It doesn't even have to be that lengthy of a statement. Just like say, hey, we're aware of this situation, get out in front of it, and put something out there. But yeah, it's crazy that we've literally just have heard nothing.
Now-
and think about it, we've had a draft in between there. We've had, all this types of stuff. That's
You
in
always have to
between,
be
so.
scared of like, you don't want to, tick off investors, right? That's basically what an
Sure.
owner is an investor in the league, right? And everybody knows in an early stage, chances are most of these owners are losing money.
Right.
That's a known. You're going to take a couple losses. Maybe the top ones could, make a decent buck, but
Yeah.
you're going to
And
lose.
I've-
So the MLR is
yeah.
probably just scared of shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, but they got to do a better job. Like in
And
their
I've-
defense, I understand investors are a crazy thing and people could pull out and pull the rug out from under this league. So
Right.
to defend them a little bit, it is scary, but they have to be better to the players.
Yeah.
You have to care
And-
about your players.
It's not surprising, I guess, with all the fallout of this, and now with the revealing that obviously the MLR like it's crazy, like things like where they're saying how what's it called that the bills have been left for collection by the players' names, and the league still has to figure out a lot of that stuff.
That's
It's
crap.
not surprising to me that there have been inklings that George Killebrew, commissioner of the MLR, might be there might be a little bit of heat coming there under his seat there for
Rightfully
him,
so.
and that's not something that you want to see for a guy that has done kind of similar to what Gilchrist was doing early in the days in terms of his impact on the MLR. Killebrew is a guy that has been amazing as commissioner of the MLR and its establishment as a league at the start of this. Obviously, some things here and there, but yeah, this is not something that we believe was handled necessarily the best way. So obviously, there are people that need to be accountable for that, whoever that may be. So it sounds like slowly but surely things are slowly coming out of here, and then we'll see whether or not we get. But it's been a busy week with regards to the Adam Gilchrist watch and the where in the world is Adam Gilchrist saga on the Fantasy Ruckers show.
Let's just hope this is the peak of it and it gets better from here, because
Yeah.
it could get worse too.
I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think that there's a new team. It's
No.
too soon. I mean, the
It's
Dallas
too
Jackals,
soon.
it took forever for the Dallas Jackals to get into the league. They even needed to postpone a year. I know a large part of that was due to COVID and things like that, but it's not easy to implement a franchise brand new, and you're gonna find it hard to convince me that within the next 6 months, half a year, give or take, that you're going to be able to put together a franchise that's going to be up and running for the start of the season. I don't think so. So
and then competitive at that, yeah, tough. to
right,
believe.
yeah. I mean, we had a dispersal draft for the Dallas Jackals when they came in, and they didn't do too hot last year. Can imagine a team that is given less than half the time to develop a franchise, what they would be able to do in that time as well. But yeah, who knows? It's crazy to think about. Definitely not no shortage of crazy headlines in the MLR this offseason. Whether it's the roster moves we talked about earlier in this episode, or it's this Adam Gilchrist, Giltinis, Gilgronis situation that we've been following since day one. It's been a wild ride for the better or for worse, really. Because like we said, this is not something that you want to see for any developing league at the beginning. But nonetheless, it's all right. But yeah, we'll see, man. We'll keep all you listeners and all you viewers updated with what is going on here and largely what the impact it's going to have on the fantasy landscape. But hey, because 8 teams, 6 teams, 10 teams, 15 teams, 20 teams, 13 teams, we're still having a Fantasy Ruckers League. We're still gonna have a season. There's still fantasy rugby. It don't matter.
Once we get down to 3 and 4 teams, I think we're some shady
dude.
I certainly can't come last in, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, dude, if we drop down to 1 or 2 teams, it's just gonna be like 3-man squads. You just pick your team.
It's true.
It'll be interesting. Yeah. But yeah, we'll see how it is. Definitely gonna have a shakeup on the fantasy landscape, but it should be interesting. Anything else you guys got to say about the Adam Gilchrist situation and all that stuff?
I've had enough. The jokes are over now that he's affecting families.
It's just getting sad now.
Yeah, so hopefully it all gets resolved soon. All right, and as we close out the episode, just want to give all of our listeners and all of our viewers kind of an update of what you guys can expect for kind of the weeks to come, the rest of the year, and kind of heading into the 2023 season. Had to postpone that episode that we teased about introducing all of the stats all put together that we've been going through over the past few weeks of our MLR stats deep dive and kind of introducing hits, breakdown steals, things like that into the mix. We will be doing that next episode next week. We're going to put that all together, see how that affected the fantasy rankings, and then go through kind of how the fantasy landscape shifts when we have all those things introduced into our league. I think it's going to be a really, really interesting topic to talk about and see how players kind of move up and down the rankings. Guys like Michael Smith, guys like Lucas Rumble, these types of players, how we see the impact that they can have in a fantasy world that does include hits. That will be coming up as well. We're obviously going to also include interviews, still trying to line up some stuff with some players in the MLR, current players, guys that have been drafted, things like that. If you've missed any of our interviews, we talked to a whole bunch: Seth Purdy, Owen Rudden, Calixto Martinez, top picks in this past year's draft, and then also current players: Andrew Coe, Mike Smith, Jack McRogers, Andrew Quatrin. The list goes on and on. You can all check that out on those episodes on our podcast channel. We also have an interview archives playlist on our YouTube channel as well that you can check out there. So we're going to continue bringing you those interviews, and then also going forward here, look out for announcements with regards to our fantasy league. We're going to slowly start punching out some more information here, start getting things set up for this upcoming year. Like we said, it still feels far away, but I'm telling you, it's going to come faster than you do think, and it's going to be 2023 before you know it. So make sure you're all looking out for those updates on our social media pages at the Fantasy Ruckers. All right, guys, a little bit of a different episode here, a lot of news stuff, but I think we're all caught up and we're all back on track. So when we come back next week, it's all about the fantasy stats. We'll have a little bit of news to catch up on, but nonetheless, it's all about the numbers going into next week's episode. And I think it's going to be fun to find out who that top 10 is and whether or not that's going to help you guys get out of the basement there in your fantasy Ruckers league as opposed to last year. Hey, maybe your scouting department for hits and breakdown steals is better for you than your offense.
No, I only scouted the Gilgronis and the Giltinis, so that's an issue for me.
All right. Yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to end it here. For Matt Yee, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, I'm Ryan Yee. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you tune in next week to the Fantasy Rucker Show. A whole bunch of stats that are going to be a lot of fun in fantasy rugby. We'll see you then.
Who drank the Gillies?
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.